What if everything you thought was yours, your home, your money, your perfect life, vanished overnight? Diana had it all: a wealthy husband, a secret lover, a life of luxury and control. But when her double life spirals out of control, she wakes up to find her world shattered beyond repair. The house, sold behind her back, the bank accounts, empty, and the man she betrayed, gone without a trace, leaving her with nothing but the ruins of her own choices. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. Diana lounged gracefully in her tastefully decorated Staten Island apartment, the distant murmur of the city seeping through the windows like an unspoken secret. Inside, the space was serene, almost deceptively so, belying the tempest of thoughts swirling within her mind. Under the soft glow of the living room's dim lighting, her dark eyes gleamed as she swirled the deep red liquid in her glass before taking a measured sip. Each taste was an opportunity for contemplation, a moment to reflect on the choices that had brought her to this very evening. Across from her, Cyrus sprawled lazily on the couch, his relaxed demeanor laced with the irresistible charm that had ensnared her from the start. His lean frame stretched effortlessly across the cushions, the smirk on his lips tinged with amusement. From the instant they had met, he had slipped seamlessly into her world, an exhilarating reprieve from the tedium of her marriage. He was everything Jacob, her husband, was not: unpredictable, passionate, electric. "Money is never an issue," Diana remarked smoothly, her tone unwavering. She set her glass down with casual precision, a flicker of mischief dancing in her gaze. "Jacob takes care of everything. He's my walking trust fund. All you need to do is keep me entertained." Cyrus's brow arched, his grin widening at her audacity. "And you think he'll stay in the dark?" he asked, his voice laced with amusement. Crossing one leg over the other, Diana leaned back, her stare unwavering. "Jacob? He's drowning in work. As far as he knows, I'm the picture-perfect wife. He suspects nothing." Cyrus let out a low chuckle, shaking his head in disbelief. She maneuvered this double life with astonishing ease. "But what if he does?" he pressed, his curiosity piqued. She waved a dismissive hand, exuding confidence. "He won't. Jacob's entire world revolves around his career. To him, I'm just another piece of his curated success, a polished wife to display at corporate galas." A glimmer of defiance flickered in her expression, the thrill of deception only adding to her exhilaration. Cyrus shifted forward, closing the distance between them with deliberate ease. Taking the glass from her hand, he placed it aside, his voice a teasing murmur. "And what does that make you?" Holding his gaze, Diana's lips curled into a knowing smile. "A woman who always gets what she wants." His fingers brushed over her shoulders, pulling her closer, their faces inches apart. "And what is it that you want?" he murmured. A sharp breath caught in her throat before she whispered against his lips. "You." Their affair was a calculated escape, one she had meticulously nurtured over time. Diana had long outgrown the life she had built with Jacob. She yearned for intensity, spontaneity, something beyond regimented schedules and lifeless dinner conversations. With Cyrus, she rediscovered the woman she had once been, the woman she longed to be again. As their lips collided in a fervent, urgent kiss, the weight of their secret only heightened the moment's intensity. His hands traced the contours of her body, and she responded in kind, pulling him closer still. For now, the outside world ceased to exist. As Cyrus's fingers trailed down her spine, sending ripples of sensation through her, her mind drifted briefly to the future, their upcoming getaway to Hawaii. Days bathed in golden sunlight by the infinity pool, nights wrapped in indulgence, every luxury effortlessly funded by Jacob's relentless dedication to his work. He wouldn't suspect a thing. The thought only fueled her anticipation. The sudden vibration of her phone against the coffee table shattered the moment. With a sigh, Diana reached for it, her eyes flicking to the screen. A message from Jacob. Working late again. Don't wait up. A smirk tugged at her lips as she turned the screen toward Cyrus. See? Completely oblivious. Cyrus glanced at the message before meeting her gaze, his grin resurfacing. So, Hawaii? She leaned into him, nodding. Hawaii. Their plans for the escape continued to unfold, each new detail only heightening the anticipation. The rift between her and Jacob had grown too vast to mend, and in that space, Diana had carved out her own freedom. With Cyrus, she felt more alive than she had in years. For a fleeting moment, her mind wandered back to the past. She had met Jacob fresh out of college, drawn to his ambition, his unwavering determination to build a future. Together, they had constructed a life that, on the surface, seemed flawless. But time had eroded the connection between them, leaving Diana as little more than an ornament in his carefully structured world. Meeting Cyrus had changed everything. He was Jacob's opposite in every way, bold, spontaneous, and most importantly, present. With him, she wasn't confined to a role. She was a woman who still had fire in her soul. She had played the part of the devoted wife for long enough. Now, she was ready for something different, something more. Cyrus's voice pulled her back to reality. I've been checking out resorts in Maui, he said, showing her images on his phone. This one has a private beach, infinity pools, the works. Her lips curled in anticipation. The future stretched before her, glistening with promise, unburdened by consequence, and she intended to seize it all. Diana leaned in closer, her eyes gleaming with intrigue. That looks amazing, she whispered, a thrill creeping into her voice. Picture it, lounging by the pool all day with a cocktail in hand, and our nights. Well, you know. Cyrus's smirk deepened as he pulled her closer. I like the way you think, he murmured. What about flights? She pressed, already imagining the Hawaiian sun warming her skin. Next week, he answered without hesitation. I'll handle everything tonight. A slow smile spread across Diana's lips as she envisioned the ocean breeze and the golden sand beneath her toes, a stark contrast to the rigid structure of her life in New York. I'll tell Jacob it's a girl's trip. He won't question it. As the evening stretched on, their anticipation grew with each detail they mapped out. For Diana, this wasn't just a getaway. It was an escape, a dream come to life. And best of all, Jacob would remain blissfully unaware. By the time Cyrus left the following morning, Diana's mind had already drifted to Hawaii. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, she thought about the life she had built with Jacob. For years, she had fulfilled her role as the devoted wife, slipping effortlessly into expectations, only to realize how little say she had in her own life. Jacob had never asked her what she wanted. He had simply assumed she would always be there. Now, for the first time, she was making her own choices, and Cyrus was part of that. After a brief pause, she reached for her phone and typed a message to Jacob. Just finished up here. See you tomorrow, maybe? His reply came almost instantly, as predictable as ever. Sure. Got a big presentation in the morning. Don't stay up too late. A smirk played on her lips. So predictable. It was almost laughable how easily she deceived him. Setting the phone aside, she slipped beneath the sheets, pushing all thoughts of Jacob from her mind. Her thoughts turned instead to sunlit shores, the feel of Cyrus's arms around her, the rhythmic crash of waves. This was what she wanted. It was all within reach. The days in Maui were as blissful as she had imagined. The island was paradise, lush, indulgent, and intoxicating. She and Cyrus spent their afternoons basking under the sun, sipping on tropical cocktails, surrendering to every pleasure the island had to offer. They dined in the finest restaurants, sailed on private yachts, and uncovered the island's hidden wonders. She reveled in the extravagance, allowing the life she had left behind to fade into insignificance. One afternoon, after a lavish breakfast by the pool, she sat beside Cyrus, watching the waves roll onto the shore. The sun warmed her skin, and she let out a deep sigh of contentment. "This is everything." Cyrus shot her a teasing glance. "All thanks to that paycheck waiting for you back home, huh?" Diana laughed, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "Exactly. And the best part? Jacob's probably drowning in work right now, completely oblivious to all of this." Cyrus leaned in, brushing his lips against hers. He has no idea what he's missing. As the days passed, their time in Hawaii became a blur of indulgence and passion. For the first time in years, Diana wasn't defined by Jacob's career or society's expectations. She felt liberated, vibrant, alive in a way she hadn't in ages. With Cyrus, she had discovered a life unburdened by duty and pretense, one that fed her hunger for freedom. But as their vacation neared its end, a quiet unease settled over her. The secrecy, the thrill, the exhilaration, it had all been intoxicating. And yet, deep down, she knew it couldn't last forever. She couldn't keep reality at bay indefinitely. Still, she wondered, was there a way to hold on to this? To maintain the balance between the woman she was with Cyrus and the wife she was expected to be with Jacob? The flight back to New York felt unbearably long. The silence of the cabin only amplified the questions racing through her mind. The magic of Maui had faded, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. She had worn the mask of Jacob's perfect wife for so long, yet now she felt like a stranger in her own life. Was it Cyrus she had fallen for, or the liberation he represented? Was it the secrecy that thrilled her, or was she simply exhausted from being an accessory to Jacob's ambitions? A gentle touch pulled her from her thoughts. Cyrus's hand resting on hers, grounding her for a fleeting moment. She met his gaze, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "It'll all be fine," he reassured her, though his voice lacked conviction. "You've got it all under control. Jacob won't suspect a thing." She nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. The rush of the affair was wearing thin, leaving behind the weight of reality. Could she sustain this double life? Could she continue pretending? As the plane touched down and they moved through the terminal, a sense of inevitability settled over her. The fantasy was over. Reality awaited. Standing in front of her brownstone, she hesitated. It was all so familiar, the pristine facade, the comfortable routine. Yet, as she reached for the door, something inside her shifted. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she was stepping back into her old life or leaving something behind. Diana's chest tightened as she stepped onto the pavement, her breath catching at the sight before her. A moving truck rumbled idly at the curb, workers carting out furniture and taped-up boxes. Her furniture, her boxes. A cold wave of dread crashed over her. What was happening? She rushed forward, her voice laced with urgency as she confronted one of the movers. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" she demanded, her pulse thrumming in her ears. The man barely spared her a glance, continuing his work with an air of indifference. "Just finishing up. The new owners will be here soon." The word struck like a physical blow. "New owners?" she repeated, her voice faltering. The mover's brow furrowed slightly, as if puzzled by her confusion. "Yeah. Sale went through a couple of weeks ago. Your husband handled everything." Her stomach plummeted. Jacob. A sick realization settled over her like a shroud. He had sold their house, their home, without a single word, without a warning. The betrayal twisted inside her, leaving her breathless. She stumbled through the front door, her eyes darting around the nearly empty rooms. It was unrecognizable. The warmth, the memories, the sense of security, all of it had been stripped away. A few abandoned boxes lined the walls, lonely remnants of a life that no longer existed. In the center of the living room stood a young couple, beaming with excitement. "Diana, right?" the woman said cheerfully. "We just bought the house last week." A crushing weight pressed against Diana's chest. "I didn't sell the house," she managed, her voice thick with disbelief. "There has to be some mistake." The man's expression turned cautious as he flipped through a folder in his hands. "No mistake," he said after a moment. "Your husband signed all the paperwork. You might want to talk to him." A nauseating dread coiled in her stomach. "Where is he?" she asked, barely above a whisper. The couple exchanged an uncertain glance. "We don't know," the woman admitted. "The realtor handled everything remotely." With shaking fingers, Diana pulled out her phone and dialed Jacob's number. The call rang and rang before finally going to voicemail. Panic clawed at her as she opened her banking app, her heart hammering wildly. Her accounts were empty, every last dollar gone. A dizzying sense of horror swept over her. Jacob hadn't just walked away, he had erased her life. Her home, her savings, her stability vanished in an instant. She staggered back outside, her thoughts spiraling into chaos. He hadn't just abandoned her, he had destroyed her. Fueled by a desperate mix of fear and fury, she flagged down a cab and directed it to the nearest police station. Someone had to help her. Someone had to stop him. But as she sat at the front desk, pouring out her story, the officer barely looked up from his paperwork. "We'll look into it," he muttered dismissively, already moving on to something else. The weight of hopelessness settled over her as she walked back out into the night. How was she supposed to track down a man who had erased every trace of himself? How was she supposed to rebuild when everything had been taken from her? Determined, she launched her own search. She visited the realtor's office, demanding answers, but all she got was the same story. Jacob had finalized the sale through emails and phone calls, no in-person meetings, no forwarding address, just a ghost in the system. She reached out to friends, old co-workers, anyone who might have seen him. No one had any answers. It was as if he had ceased to exist, leaving only wreckage in his wake. Days turned into weeks, and her desperation grew with each passing moment. She scraped together what little money she had left to hire a private investigator, but even he came back empty-handed. Her once stable world had crumbled, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't put it back together. And then, even Cyrus, the one person she had leaned on, began to slip away. One night, in the dim glow of their cramped motel room, he exhaled heavily. "We need to talk." Diana barely looked up from the growing pile of unpaid bills. "What now?" He rubbed a hand over his face, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "I can't keep doing this. We're out of money, Diana. We need a plan, or I don't know how much longer I can stay." Tears burned her eyes. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I'm doing everything I can to find him." But deep down, she knew the truth. She was chasing a ghost. As weeks bled into months, survival became her only focus. She sold off her last possessions, maxed out her credit cards, did whatever she could to keep going. The social circles she had once belonged to now turned their backs, unwilling to acknowledge her downfall. Everything she had was gone. And Jacob had left her to gather the shattered remains alone. Cyrus, too, had reached his limit. The relentless cycle of hardship, the unyielding pressure, and the mounting financial strain had drained him completely. One evening, without uttering a word, he packed his belongings and left. Just like Jacob before him, he vanished, leaving Diana to fend for herself. The solitude that followed was absolute. Those she had once depended on were gone, and she was left to navigate a world that had become unrecognizable. The years ahead were cruel, each day a battle, each moment a stark reminder of how far she had fallen. The life she once knew, filled with comfort and security, had become a distant memory, replaced by a struggle for mere survival. Yet, despite everything, her resolve never wavered. No matter how much time passed, she remained fixated on one goal: finding Jacob. She needed to see him again, to demand answers, to understand why he had abandoned her. 11 relentless years slipped by, reshaping her into someone she hardly recognized. The luxuries of her past were gone, replaced by a day-to-day existence that demanded every ounce of her strength. And still, she searched, unwilling to let go of the past. At last, a clue surfaced, a whisper of his presence in a quiet town, far from the world they once shared. Clutching what remained of her savings, she purchased a ticket and embarked on the journey. The town was nothing like the bustling city where she had thrived. It was serene, with winding streets and a gentle stillness that contrasted sharply with the chaos of her past. As she wandered through its unfamiliar roads, her heart pounded with anticipation and fear, her eyes scanning desperately for any sign of him. Her search led her to a modest house on the town's outskirts, the very place her information suggested he now lived. As she stood at the gate, an unease settled deep in her chest. And then she saw him. Jacob was in the yard, playing with 2 young children, their laughter filling the air. His face, once familiar, was alight with a joy she hadn't seen in years. A woman stood nearby, watching with a quiet smile, her presence radiating warmth and contentment. For an instant, a sharp pang of jealousy coursed through Diana, but beneath it lay something deeper, an aching emptiness. The future she had once imagined with Jacob was now someone else's reality. It had slipped from her grasp, lost to the years that had passed without him. She stood frozen, watching the life that might have been hers unfold before her, now impossibly out of reach. She waited, biding her time until he was alone. When he finally stepped away from the house, she took a steadying breath and called his name. He turned abruptly, his gaze landing on her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "What are you doing here?" His voice was devoid of warmth. "I had to find you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Jacob, I've been through so much. Please, can we talk?" His posture stiffened, his expression unreadable. For a brief second, she thought she saw something familiar in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, but just as quickly, it disappeared. "There's nothing to talk about," he replied, his tone firm. "You made your choice. You walked away." Her throat tightened, tears threatening to spill. "Please, Jacob. I know I made mistakes, but I never meant for things to end this way. Can't you at least forgive me?" His face remained impassive, his voice unwavering. "I've moved on. I have a family now. I'm happy. And you should be too. There's nothing left for you here." His words struck her with brutal finality. The man she had loved, the life she had longed to reclaim, was gone. In his place stood a stranger, a man who no longer had space for her in his world. Jacob cast one last glance in her direction before turning away, walking back toward the house that was no longer theirs. She remained there as the sun dipped below the horizon, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. The past was lost to time, and the future stretched before her as a vast, uncertain void. Alone once more, she was left with nothing but the heavy burden of her regrets. This story has come to an end. You can spend years building an illusion, deceiving others and yourself, but the truth always finds a way to surface. And when it does, everything you thought was stable can crumble in an instant. This story teaches us that you cannot build real happiness on deception, because when you betray others, you ultimately betray yourself. True happiness comes from honesty, loyalty, and hard work, not from shortcuts and empty thrills. Value what you have, stay true to yourself, and remember, life always brings justice, one way or another. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you? He was the man who could fix anything, except maybe the woman he loved. Imagine giving someone your heart, only to realize you're just their private joke when no one's looking. Declan built a life from scratch, turning wrenches and busted pipes into a successful business. But when his fiancée Sable starts using his career as comedy material at her posh corporate party, the cracks in their relationship are exposed in front of everyone. What do you do when love feels like home, but respect is missing? This is a story about pride, betrayal, and the quiet power of walking away when someone can't see your worth. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now, let's get started. My name is Declan, and I'm 35. I run my own plumbing business, a trade I picked up from my uncle, who mentored me as though I were his own son. When he left me his small shop, I seized the opportunity to build on his legacy, expanding it from a modest 2-person operation into a thriving business with a team of 8. 3 years ago, I met Sable at a backyard barbecue. She worked in corporate marketing, spoke in polished industry jargon that sometimes went over my head, but carried herself with a kind of effortless confidence that drew me in. Despite our different backgrounds, we connected over a shared passion for horror movies, spontaneous ice cream runs, and weekend kayaking trips. At first, everything between us felt easy, but as time passed, subtle differences began to emerge. Her world revolved around polished professionals, and at her work gatherings, I often felt like an outsider. She never openly belittled me. Yet, whenever I mentioned my profession, she had a habit of steering the conversation elsewhere. It was never outright dismissive, but the implication was clear. She preferred to keep that part of my life separate from hers. I told myself it didn't matter, that love was what truly counted. After 2 years together, I proposed, and she accepted without hesitation. For a while, I believed we were solid. Then came the night of her company's holiday party, the night that changed everything. Determined to make a good impression, I dug out my only suit, reserved for weddings and funerals. Sable, radiant in a shimmering blue dress, was practically buzzing with excitement as we arrived at the venue, which had been transformed into a dazzling holiday spectacle. "Declan, stay close, okay?" she murmured. "I don't want you getting lost." I chuckled. "Don't worry, I'll be your shadow." Inside, servers weaved through the crowd, trays of champagne flutes balanced expertly in their hands. While Sable eagerly accepted a glass of wine, I opted for sparkling water. She introduced me to her colleagues, Luna, who was overseeing the DJ, and Aaron, a sharply dressed man with a firm handshake. "So, how do you two know each other?" Aaron asked. With a smile, Sable flashed her ring. "Declan's my fiancé." The warmth in her voice made me feel, at least for that moment, like I truly belonged. For a while, everything seemed to be going smoothly. Then Victor, one of her co-workers, approached with an amused smirk. "Sable, you promised to introduce us to your legendary fiancé," he teased. "We hear he's got a magic touch when it comes to fixing things." I laughed. "I do my best." A woman nearby leaned in with curiosity. "So, what do you do for a living?" Before I could respond, Sable, now on her second, maybe third drink, giggled and interjected, "Oh, he's my personal plumber." A few chuckles rippled through the group. Then, with a playful smirk, she added, "So if anyone's toilet acts up tonight, don't worry. I've got the hookup." I forced a smile. I'd heard jokes about my job before, but something about the way she said it, like I was a novelty rather than a partner, left me unsettled. Later, as we sat for dinner, more introductions followed. The conversation at our table shifted toward my work, just as Sable's boss took the stage to deliver a speech. "So, Declan, how does a plumber manage to date a corporate rock star like Sable?" someone asked. I smiled. "Running my own business gives me the flexibility to set my own hours," Before I could elaborate, Sable cut in, her voice louder than necessary. Yeah, but that also means he spends his days knee-deep in some pretty nasty stuff. She smirked. At least he cleans up before coming home. Laughter spread across the table. My face burned, but I said nothing, telling myself she was just a little tipsy, just trying to be funny. And yet, the gnawing feeling remained. She wasn't presenting me as her equal, she was making me the punchline. As the evening wore on, Sable's boss, Naomi, stood to give a toast, recognizing the hard work of the team and highlighting a few standout employees, including Sable. Beaming, Sable leaned in and whispered, "I might be getting a promotion next quarter. Can you believe it?" I mustered a smile. "That's incredible. I'm proud of you." She squeezed my hand before turning back to the speech. Soon, Naomi invited team members to the stage for brief remarks. When Sable's name was called, I nudged her encouragingly, and she walked up with confidence, champagne glass in hand. "Thank you, Naomi," she began, her voice carrying through the room. "This means so much. Our team worked incredibly hard on this campaign." Applause followed. She took a breath, then continued. "I also want to give a special shout-out to my fiancé, Declan." She gestured toward me, prompting me to stand. Feeling awkward but wanting to be polite, I rose with a small smile. Sable grinned. "That's my plumber fiancé," she announced with a laugh. "If your sink or toilet ever gives you trouble, he's the one to call. And don't worry, he's pretty affordable." Scattered laughter filled the room, but this time the sound carried a different weight. There was an edge to it, a sharpness in her tone that stung. She sipped her champagne, clearly enjoying the moment. Someone from the front row called out, "Hey Declan, do we get company discounts?" More laughter. Sable turned to me with an amused grin. "Maybe," she teased. "But no freebies. We've got bills to pay, right, honey?" I forced another smile, but my chest felt tight. This was supposed to be her night, her celebration, yet somehow I had become the evening's entertainment. When she returned to her seat, giggling, her face flushed with excitement, I leaned in and asked quietly, "What was that about?" She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, come on, Declan. Don't be so serious. It was just a joke." I swallowed hard, but the knot in my stomach refused to ease. It didn't feel like a joke. With a casual flick of her wrist, she dismissed me, her attention already shifting to a nearby colleague. I stared down at my untouched drink, a slow, dull ache blooming in my chest. The music swelled, the party rolled on, oblivious. Sable reached for another glass of champagne, unfazed. I pushed back from the table, rising to my feet. The need for space clawed at me, anything to put distance between myself and the suffocating realization that something between us had shifted. Stepping outside, I inhaled deeply, letting the crisp night air fill my lungs, cutting through the fog in my head. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing, my thoughts looping in an endless, frantic cycle. How did we get here? Why had Sable thought it was acceptable to humiliate me like that, reducing my career to a punchline in front of her colleagues? The sharp sound of heels clicking against the pavement pulled me from my thoughts. She was following me. A second later, her voice sliced through the stillness. "Hey." Impatience tinged her tone more than concern. I turned to face her. She still clutched her champagne glass, her expression unreadable. "Are you seriously upset about this?" she asked, her brow knitting in mild irritation. "Yeah," I admitted, working to keep my voice steady. "Sable, you made a joke out of my career, in front of an entire room of people. They weren't laughing with me. They were laughing at me." She let out a sharp breath, rolling her eyes. "Oh, come on, Declan. You're overreacting. It was just a bit of fun." I exhaled slowly, fighting to keep my frustration in check. That's exactly the problem. It wasn't fun for me. You turned me into some kind of spectacle. Something to amuse your colleagues." Her cheeks were flushed. Whether from embarrassment or the champagne, I couldn't tell. "You're blowing this out of proportion. People tease each other at parties. It's normal." I shook my head. "Not like that. Not by tearing down what someone does for a living. You made it seem like my job is something to be ashamed of." She looked at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. I respect what you do, but let's be honest. It's not exactly prestigious. I was just making light of how different our worlds are." I crossed my arms. "Respect? You only find my job charming when it's convenient, but the moment we're around your colleagues, it's a joke. And this isn't the first time. This has been happening for a while." She glanced back toward the entrance, suddenly cautious, as if worried someone might overhear. "Declan, can we not do this here? This is my company's party. Let's go back inside, have another drink, and talk about it tomorrow." A sharp wave of anger surged through me. "No, Sable. I'm done pushing this aside." Her expression darkened. "What's that supposed to mean?" I drew in a steadying breath, searching her face for any flicker of remorse. "It means," I said quietly, "I can't marry someone who doesn't respect me." She let out a disbelieving laugh, brittle and sharp. "You can't be serious. You're willing to throw away our engagement over a harmless joke?" I looked down at my hand, my fingers tightening around the simple band we had chosen together. My hands trembled slightly as I slid it off. For a moment, I just held it, remembering the day I proposed. Sable's eyes widened, alarm creeping into her features. "Declan, don't you dare," she warned, her voice rising. I extended the ring toward her. "If you can't understand why this matters, then there's nothing left to say. I won't spend my life defending my career to the one person who's supposed to support me." Her mouth parted in shock, and she took a step back. "Oh my God. You're actually serious? All this over a couple of jokes?" My jaw tightened. "They weren't jokes. They were insults. You embarrassed me in front of everyone, and you won't even acknowledge it." Her expression hardened, frustration boiling over. "So what? You expect me to beg for forgiveness over something so minor?" "Grow up, Declan. People joke about their partner's jobs all the time. I never complain about the way you come home smelling like grease, or how you're always exhausted and covered in grime." A fresh wave of pain crashed through me. "Do you even hear yourself? Instead of apologizing, you're doubling down." She folded her arms, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Fine. I'm not sorry, and I'm not standing out here in the cold while you play the wounded victim." I looked at her, really looked at her, and the truth settled in my chest like a stone. She wasn't the woman I thought I loved, or maybe she never had been. All that remained was this dismissive, indifferent person who saw me as something less. "Then this is it," I said quietly. She let out a hollow, incredulous laugh. "I can't believe you're throwing everything away over this. You couldn't handle a little teasing, so now you're walking away?" I placed the ring in her palm. "I'm walking away because I deserve someone who's proud of me." Without another word, I turned and stepped back inside. I only had one thought: grab my coat and leave this night behind. As I re-entered the party, a hush seemed to settle over the room, the weight of my decision pressing against me. But for the first time that night, I felt lighter. Maybe people had overheard fragments of our argument, or perhaps the tension between us was so thick it was impossible to ignore. I reached for my coat, keeping my expression unreadable. Just as I was about to step out, Sable stormed in behind me, gripping the engagement ring so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her face was flushed with frustration, her voice a sharp whisper. "Not here," she hissed. "You're causing a scene." I glanced around briefly. Aaron was murmuring something to the person beside him, and Naomi, her boss, observed us with thinly veiled concern. But at that point, I was beyond caring about appearances. "I wasn't the one who turned this into a public spectacle," I said evenly. "I tried to have this conversation privately, but you shut me down." She reached out, fingertips brushing against my sleeve, but I stepped back. "Declan, please, let's talk about this when we're both calm." I met her gaze, disappointment sitting heavy in my chest. "That moment has passed, Sable." Without another word, I turned and walked away. The drive home was silent, aside from the persistent buzzing of my phone. Message after message lit up the screen. "We need to talk. You're overreacting." "I'm sorry." I ignored them all. If she couldn't respect me in public, then what did that say about our relationship? By morning, she was still in the house, moving around quietly, but the air was thick with words left unsaid. I could feel her watching me as I got ready for work, waiting for me to engage. But I had nothing left to offer. Later, she started shifting the narrative, telling our mutual friends that I had lost my temper over a harmless joke. Some took her side, others reached out to hear mine. I kept my response simple. This wasn't about one joke. It was about a repeated pattern of disrespect. Some understood, others dismissed it. One message stood out in particular. "Dude, if you're that sensitive about plumbing jokes, maybe pick a career that's harder to mock." That one stung, but it also reaffirmed why I had walked away. That night, I told Sable to pack her things. The house was mine. I had bought it long before she came into my life. She tried to downplay everything, insisting I was making too big a deal out of it, but I was done with the debate. By morning, she was gone. She moved back in with her parents. A few days later, she shared her version of events online. When a man can't handle a strong woman with a sense of humor, his true colors show. According to her, I was insecure, controlling, unwilling to accept her personality. I chose not to engage publicly, but I did talk to people who mattered, like my cousin Todd, who had known me forever. "She's twisting it," he said. "You've never been insecure about your work. She just doesn't want to admit she was wrong." Then, as if the universe was making a statement, karma intervened. Not long after she moved home, her parents' bathroom pipes burst, flooding the floors and seeping into the walls. A mutual friend later mentioned the repair bill was in the thousands. For the first time, Sable probably understood. My work wasn't a joke. It was essential. She never reached out again, and I never got an apology. Instead, I focused on what truly mattered: growing my business, expanding my team, mentoring apprentices who actually valued the trade. Months passed. Sable changed departments at work, seemingly trying to move past the fallout. Rumors floated around that she was dating someone from her office. I never cared enough to ask for details. My life had moved on. One evening, after a long day of installing pipes in a historic building, I sat in my truck, watching the golden light reflect off my company's freshly redesigned logo. A deep sense of gratitude settled over me. I won't lie. There were moments I missed certain things about Sable: her adventurous nature, the way she'd curl up next to me during scary movies. But I never missed the way she made me feel small. Eventually, I started dating again. This time, I found someone different, someone who saw the value in what I did, who admired my skills rather than ridiculing them. She loved that I built things with my hands, that I created something real, and she was proud of me. That changed everything. Now, whenever someone asks for relationship advice, I keep it simple. Pay attention to how your partner talks about you in public. Do they uplift you, or are you just another punchline? Because respect isn't optional, it's everything. This story has come to an end. It doesn't matter what you do for a living: plumber, doctor, barista. If the person next to you is ashamed of you or looks down on your work, that's not love, that's convenience for them. A real partner will be proud of you, your hard work, and will stand by you both privately and publicly. Never let anyone turn you into a joke to make themselves look better. Respect is not optional. It's the foundation of any relationship. And if someone can't give you that, have the courage to walk away, because one day you'll find someone who truly values and appreciates you for who you are. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.